Next on the agenda is new business, and the first item under that category is current use update.
Good evening. I have prepared an update. You all got a copy of it. I don't know if you want me to read it or if you just want to look at it and ask questions. How
Well, we
would you
just
like
got
to-
this evening, so if you could read it through it, and that'll give us a chance to digest it.
Okay. There are 5,455 parcels in Claremont, comprised of 26,537 acres of land. Approximately 69% of Claremont's land mass, or 18,328 acres, is enrolled in the New Hampshire Current Use Program. The New Hampshire Department of Revenue oversees the current use program and annually sets value ranges for each land classification, such as farmland, forest land, unproductive or wetlands, etc. The assessed value of this current use land for the 2016 tax year is $1,101,730, which results in $46,955.73 in tax revenue. The assessing department personnel is continuing a comprehensive review of all properties enrolled in the current use program to verify the necessary paperwork in each file is complete and accurate. Property owners will be notified by mail if any documentation is missing or outdated, with a request to correct any deficiency. Also, each file is reviewed to determine whether the current use land has been properly categorized, using whatever resources are available to make reasonable estimations. If a property owner has developed or changed the use of the property, a land use change tax, otherwise known as an LUCT, will be issued for the portion of the land that no longer qualifies for current use assessment, and that will be taxed at a rate of 10% of the full true ad valorem value of the land removed. The unqualified land will continue to be assessed at ad valorem value as long as the change remains in place. A change in use may be physical changes to the earth, such as building a road, beginning construction, installation of utilities or services, removal of topsoil, etc. If a property owner disagrees with the municipality's determination, there is an appeal process available. The current use statute places the burden on the property owner to prove the municipality is incorrect in its assessment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Toll?
I have a question about one of the sentences. I have it in this pile, but I
Okay.
remember you saying something about reasonable use of resources
Yes.
for the acknowledgement of the use of that land, and then you went into the change. So what did that mean? What were the?
What, such as aerial photography, riding by the site, walking into the site. Sometimes we get a complaint or a report from a neighbor that we need to follow up on.
And how often is that done?
Um,
Only after a complaint notice, or?
No, right now, we have started from A's, and we're halfway through the alphabet now. We're reviewing every file. And
Wonderful.
we have 2 file cabinets, 4 drawers each, and they're deep file cabinets, and we're about halfway through.
Well, that's a big job.
It is a big job.
Yeah, thank you.
It's necessary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Counselor Dameron?
Yeah, I'm interested, I guess, in knowing a little bit more about the success rate of this. The third paragraph, last sentence, property owners will be notified by mail if documentation is missing and outdated, specifically with a request to correct the deficiency. Do they correct the deficiency, or what's the success rate? Or, I mean, we've heard from the fire department and other people.
Less than half.
Pardon me?
Less than half.
So what happens for those people who ignore it?
then we will use our best estimate of what is going on in the property and send out the LUCT and let them challenge us.
And you'll do that within a year?
Yes.
Or- Okay.
Yes. When we find a change of use on the property or suspect a change of use on the property, we do have 12 months to issue the LUCT. So it
Okay.
gives us time to verify it as best we can before we move on that.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Counselor Raymond?
Can you go back, if you've heard that they've done this like a year previous, and can you go back on the back taxes to reassess?
No.
Okay. That's too bad.
Good question.
Counselor Temple?
Yes, thank you, Marlene, for sharing this with us tonight.
You're welcome.
Because I think a lot of, probably the viewing public, doesn't really understand that 69% of our land mass here in Claremont is in current use. And we all know our property taxes are high. But when you look at 69% of your land mass is in current use, and it only generates $47,000 odd dollars to help run this community, is that an accurate statement on my part?
Yeah, there is.
Lots and lots of land,
Is
current use,
being taxed minimally.
minimally. And I think the viewing public needs to know that the number's $46,955. Now, I don't know what we collect in taxes each year. I know Ms. Walter's here, but there's a tremendous amount of taxes that are collected from homeowners and property owners and business owners. But yet, almost 70% of the land only generates less than $47,000 in taxes. Could you talk to us a little more about the range, the farmland, forest land, unproductive? You mentioned
I can
there's,
certainly put together
okay.
a spreadsheet for you about
And I
that.
wonder, are we at the top of the range? Or are we mid-range of what we could be assessing at? Or maybe I don't have that
A
terminology.
little more than mid-range.
We're a little, so there may be room for
And
growth?
that's that's when I say we're gonna look at, to make sure they're in the correct categories. There is movement. If they list it as farmland and we see that it actually is forest land, which is taxed at a higher rate, we can move some of it over into a different category.
So within the farmland, the forest land, and other lands, is there a sub-range as well? Or is all farmland at a certain rate, period,
The state gives us a range to choose from.
of
so
each
we
one of
can-
those categories? Okay, so the drift of my question, or my point, is when in time of need, and we know we need to look for revenues, I'd like to know where we are in that sub-range on each one of those things. And I had no idea, and maybe it's reasonable, but when you have 69% of your property is assessed at $1.1 million, and it generates a $46,000 revenue for a community. Pardon?
28 million.
Yeah, okay. So,
I'm sorry, what was 28 million?
28 million is what I collected in tax money.
Okay.
yeah, and some of that's city, some of that's school, some of that's county, but
It's all based off the property.
But when your finance committee gets together and we talking with the school and all that stuff, one of our biggest burdens in the community is the school tax. It's over 60%. We know they a little bit under level funding, I guess, this year.
Yes, by
And
3
that,
cents.
and that passed, and I know the struggles we're gonna have here in just a few months. As we begin to look at where other revenues are gonna come from, I'm not sure if this is untouchable or not, but we certainly need to look at it with, the famous words that property tax is a tax of choice. Well, here's a land use one that doesn't get taxed very much, but there are phone taxes and business taxes and communication taxes and TV taxes. Every time you turn around, there's a tax. But we don't touch sales tax, and we don't touch people's large property owners' taxes. as kind of hands-off. But anyway, Marlene, I appreciate this, and I think the viewing public would be very interested in this
More detail?
detail and this facts you've put together for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mr. McNabb?
And thank you very much for coming out this evening.
You're welcome.
Giving us that report. Would it be, could you correct me if I'm wrong, is it still the majority of these 257 parcels in current use that 3/4 of them are owned by folks that do not live in Claremont?
Yes. Yeah, the majority is out-of-state owners.
That adds to it.
So, I just want to follow up with Mr. McNutt. So there's 257 parcels that are in current use, is that correct?
Correct. Out of the
Out of the 500?
5,455 parcels in Claremont, 257 of them are in current use.
And 3/4 of those are out of
Out-of-state owners.
state. So, I guess we're assuming that everybody understands what the New Hampshire current use program is, so could you give us a little
I can
bit of
give-
an overview?
I had one prepared a while back. I can include that in this other report if you want, so it's.
Oh,
if-
okay,
if it's
that'll be
com-
fine.
So it's
Yep.
complete, because I don't want to leave anything out.
Sure, sure. Assistant Mayor Bergeron, you wanted to make a
Well,
comment?
I'm just gonna say this, here's, go along with Mr. Temple, Councilor Temple, here's another thing that the state does to us in a roundabout way. They passed this land use law, and out-of-town people with a lot of money buy up a lot of land and get it pretty well tax-free. But the bigger cities don't really care about this, because they don't have land to put in land use, most of them. The only one it affects is the people in rural areas, like us. As you can see, what, 3/4 are owned by people who don't even live here. So they're not worried about the tax problem here, because they got land that's, and they're paying hardly anything for. And if somebody tells me that the reason they do this is to save land for future things, well, they're not paying the bill. And that's something that needs to be eventually changed.
Councilor Klosky?
This is an item that I brought forward, and I brought this forward because I learned of it at the Master Plan Steering Committee level. And what was alarming to me then, and I brought it forward because my question is, to Ms. Jordan, is do you have adequate resources to handle this in the quickest time period possible? And if not, I would like to find the resources to do that. Because you'd be thinking that you'd be able to recoup some of those expenses this year and going forward. So the alarming part of this to me was when I was told by the planning director, they had a training session in-house at the planning office, and they randomly select files out of the filing cabinet, and anyone that they selected in that training had change of use, change of use, change of use. Those were random selections. So how many other ones out there? And if she can't get to it in a quick time frame in the resources in her office, I would like to find a way to get assistance to her. Boots on the ground, per se. But really, you have to get out there to see this. And that's why I brought it forward.
So I guess it'd be helpful for us to understand what the process is, the connectivity between the planning department and the assessing department. When there is a change of use, how is that communicated to you, and what action do you take, and all of that?
I do get an email from them, and we do pull the file and look at aerial photography, and we have pulled the ones that the planning department has found. They're amongst the ones that we have pulled for individual inspections.
Councilor Kowalski?
The ones that you're not seeing, and this is the picture I don't want lost, it's not the people out there that have a change of use and are reporting them to the city. They're the ones that are doing something, get away with it for 8 or 10 years until we find them. And that's what I want to flush out.
And I understand that, but you were talking about when they were pulling the files, that there were change of use documents. I just, I wanted to understand the process. Mr. McNutt?
And I agree with Councilor Kolosky's sentiment that this is potential revenue. It's potential tax base, and we are sorely in need of it. So we are going to endeavor to find every applicable parcel that we can pull out of current use because it no longer meets the tenants to remain in current use. Going forward, I have created an economic development team amongst some departments, and the assessing office, the community development office, and the finance director are now part of this economic development team. So Director Johnson and Director Merrill are going to be directly at the table, and I chair this, and that is one of my main top bullet points is how do we get as much value out of current use in as quick a manner as possible. And they are going to form, like the cartoon Voltron, into one entity and work towards a singular purpose.
Good. Thank you, because that's what we need. Does the council have any other questions for Ms. Jordan? Let me get to Mr. Folta. Mr. Folta, do you have a question for Ms. Jordan?
It's a perspective on the revenue that the city is potentially losing.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like a question.
Well, I could probably turn it, but thank you, Madam Mayor. Bernie Folta, Ward 3. The purpose of current use originally was to protect land from development, and it's the same in Vermont. So the state created this mechanism whereby instead of being taxed at fair market value, by enrolling a parcel in current use according to the categories, the owner of that parcel gets a tax break. So the actual tax loss to the municipality, as Councilor Temple was probing, is the difference between what it's being taxed at in current use and its fair market value.
Right.
So to know the tax loss in Claremont, you'd have to assess or guess or estimate the fair market value of each parcel, calculate the tax on that, subtract the tax they're paying. So you'd have to do that 257 times. However, some of those parcels aren't worth very much more, probably, and I don't know, probably a minority, because they're on top of Green Mountain or in the swamp that don't have a very high fair market value. So in those parcels that are undevelopable, that have no value for another purpose, like development, those would be pretty close, the fair market value would be pretty close to the current use value.
Yep.
So that's how to get the tax impact, if you want, is to assess all of them at fair market value and then do that little calculation that I suggested, and that's the tax impact to Claremont.
Thank you. Ms. Walters?
I was actually thinking the same thing that Bernie was, is that if there was no current use law, what would that potential tax loss be for Claremont? Because what Councilor Bergeron was talking about is the shifting down from the state is one more thing like I do for you every year with the loss of revenue sharing and what's that impact to the taxpayers. So, it's another state-created state program that's not state-funded. it's all on the local burden. And I had done this several months ago of, oh, maybe it's almost a year now, of asking all the other communities, what do they have as a percentage of their land that's in current use? And like Salem has 2%, and we've got almost 70. I think at one point we had like 71%. But, you know, when you're hovering around that amount of money, you got, 30% of the people are making up all that difference. So that would be a good number to know, because it sounds to me like, how do we get current use laws changed so there's more community control over what goes into current use versus, the people that you truly are giving it because they're keeping your farms or whatever it was that it was originally intended for. So, but I don't know whether it's worth your resources to be able to have her, because right now you're trying to catch the ones that are abusing it. And even if you catch them, it might be that they have 200 acres, but they're using 3 acres more than they had in current use. So now we're going to take 3 acres out. It's not like it's going to amount to a ton of money, but, it's catching them versus changing laws. And in order to do that, you have to know what that impact is, and is it worth that office's time to recalculate 270 parcels or whatever and try to guesstimate. But certainly would be nice, even with a guesstimation, to know what's the full value, to know what that tax loss potentially is.
Counselor Temple?
That's why I was interested in the little sub-range
Right.
of each type. Where are we with what the law allows us to go after? And if it's in the middle, well, maybe we need to look at an adjustment. But it just seems to me, and again, the viewing public doesn't have this necessarily in front of them, but when you've got 69% of your land is tied up in current use, and you're only generating $46,000, that doesn't even pay for a fireman.
Counselor
It
Pope?
pays for about 4 students.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I've got this whole idea right. So the current use is based on an assessment range set by the state for
Yes.
each acre of land. So I pulled something up here while we've been talking. For example, say farmland could be anywhere between $25 to $4.25 per acre, right? So, okay. So they're assessed at that kind of thing. Say forest land with stewardship, if they've got white pine, it's between 62 to 93 an acre. So I'm on the right track. So we're about in the middle of those ranges, right?
I believe we are, but I will look at our tables.
All right, very good. Thank you.
I have one question for either you or Ms. Walters. In your research, have you come across communities that may have municipal policies with regard to current use? Does that exist anywhere?
It's all state-driven, so we can't.
Yeah, maybe a state program, but sometimes municipalities will take a state statute or state program, and then they'll create a policy based on that and add to it, or I didn't know if you had found anything along those
I
lines.
haven't heard of any.
Okay. Mr. Metnick?
Aye. So, correct me if I'm wrong, the current use provision was created by the state in 1974,
I'm not sure of the year, but it was created by the state.
and there's also the provision in New Hampshire, as there is in many other states, that folks could petition to have their land conservationally restricted. They could put a conservation restriction on their land, and they could donate their land to a land trust or the community. I'm just trying to understand in New Hampshire, and this is research I could do later, but I think it's germane to talk about it now, that did current use come before the ability to do conservation restrictions? Because it seems like there could be a number of folks that did current use because they wanted this to remain open space, as Mr. Folta said, but then later legal mechanisms and provisions to have your land be restricted for conservation purposes came about. So current use might be an anachronism, and we should
Look into
try to advocate for changes at the state level so that we can catch up to the modern times and the different abilities of people to protect open space while not absorbing 70% of a community's land mass.
We'll look into that.
Anything else? Thank you for your time. Thank you for the update. And we'll leave it with your coming back with more information once you have it compiled,
Okay?
right? I mean, is that the
Right,
agreement?
that's my
Okay.
understanding.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Can I recommend something? When we do get the date that you're coming back, maybe we invite our state reps to be here for that?
That would be an
Good idea.
excellent idea, Counselor Toll. Can you give us an estimation as to when you think you would be
We
ready
won't
to?
hold you to it, but
Just an estimate.
Well, right now I'm in the middle of abatement appeals, court cases, so probably 3-4 weeks.
So this is, yeah, so we're talking maybe end of April?
Mhm.
Would that, you think? Then I can go ahead and invite the delegation.
Okay.
Good. Excellent.
Okay.
All right, thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda is strategic planning session.